It is Wednesday, June 8th, and I am at the Quincy Veterans Home with Mr. Charles Thompson, and we are going to be interviewing Mr. Thompson today for the Illinois Secretary of State's Veterans History Project. Mr. Thompson, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed with us. Can you just tell me a little bit of background, when you joined the service, if you were drafted or enlisted, how old you were then, things like that?
I'll tell you all that
Okay.
I can remember.
Great.
I come from a home in Springfield, Illinois. My folks had a house across the street from the million-gallon water tower. One of the biggest water towers at that time that there was. And I had a wonderful mother and father that really believed in Jesus Christ. And they knew that he would take care of me, and they prayed for me all the time I was in Korea. I started out joining a National Guard unit, and I served the full term of the Guard. And I felt that I needed to go into business for myself. And I always was close relations to electronics. Anything electronic, I was always so fascinated with it. And when I got out of the National Guard, I opened up a store on 6th Street next to the Black Angus Steakhouse, right by a subway under a railroad. And well, let's see. What happened when I got out of the Guard, I started the business, started repairing TVs and radios, and I was handling Zenith and Admiral TVs and stereos and whatever. Zenith distributor in Grand Rapids, J.A. White distributing. And they were a wonderful organization. And I went to many learning sessions at J.A. White's headquarters. And I did quite well in that business, but I was drafted.
Really?
Yeah, I was drafted. Got a notice in the mail that I was to report to.
Now, this was after you had already served in the National Guard?
Yeah. Well, the National Guard, I'd served my term.
Okay.
And they was discharging me, and it was a good guard unit. Come in.
I got to get something in here before I go down to PG.
my folks in Springfield had 2 boys and 2 girls, plus me. I was the last of the,
So you were the baby.
I was the baby. And they religiously went to church regularly, Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and they saw that I got there, even though I didn't really care about it, being natural.
They were making sure you learned that though.
And the big thing was that they believed in prayer so much. They never gave up. There was a family next door to where my folks were, on First Street there in Springfield. Their names were Letterleys. He worked at the Peabody Coal Company. And I like to be accurate on these things, but the one thing that I don't have no guarantee that my memory will hold up. But
I understand.
and I don't want to misquote. However, I was drafted and was sent to Missouri, the training center there in Missouri. I can't think of the name of it, and I know it. Fort Leonard Wood, I think it was. Fort Leonard Wood. That's what it was.
I've heard of that one.
It was a beautiful place. I mean, even though it was a military thing and a lot of strict training was given there, and they had some good trainers. They weren't religious trainers, they were military trainers, And I went through the training and did the best I could, and I was graduated. I was finished, and the colonel called me into his office, and he says, "Charles, I'd like for you to re-up." Boy, and I still had in mind going in that business of my own. And I said no. And things were pretty hot in Vietnam. And I knew that's where they would put me, and I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I had a taste of Korea, and I knew the bad things and the good things about it.
Now, when were you in Korea?
The date, I can't remember. It was the 60s, I think.
So was it before this time when you were at Fort Leonard Wood?
No, it's after the Fort Leonard Wood. And very interesting things happened there, I worked till I thought I'd drop, training. I was trying with everything I had to be a good soldier. So they shipped me out to Japan. And the H.B. Halls was the name of the troop carrier. prayed all the time for me. When they were Baptist faith, the neighbor next to where I lived there on First Street was Catholic. And I seen many times the husband and wife come home there so drunk they staggered up the back steps of their house. Sometimes she fell on the ground and he would help her into the house. But they loved me. And they always told me they were praying for me. And God answers prayers even for Catholics or any other religion. The only religion that I have is Jesus Christ. I never was able to put Mary ahead of Jesus Christ. Yes, she brought Jesus Christ through birth into being, and she was blessed by the Holy Spirit. This is true. And Mrs. Letterly was always preaching to me about that, because in my faith, we didn't honor Mary other than being a factional mother of Jesus Christ. And so I shipped out from Seattle, Washington, for Japan on the H.B. Hall's troop ship. The experiences on there was very difficult because I being a soldier, a lot of those people didn't have any religion. They didn't go to church, didn't go to the meetings or anything. And I had to fight seasickness. And a fellow soldier was a Oriental, and he knew how I was suffering with this seasickness. And he said, Charles, I couldn't eat, see. And he says, Charles, I'm going to give you a can of tuna fish, and you eat the tuna fish. And I thought, boy, I don't think so, but he was very insistent. But I think the Holy Spirit worked through him to get me straightened out. By the time I got to Japan, I had it under control. And it was through prayer. The one thing I did learn was that prayer is required all your life. That's one thing Jesus Christ wanted. And things happened that enforced my beliefs in this. In Japan, they processed me, got me ready to be shipped over to Korea. And so it came time to go to Korea. We was on one end of Japan, and they loaded us into a train, narrow gauge tracks. And that was quite an experience because the bathrooms are nothing like ours.
Probably not, yeah.
I mean,
Especially on a train.
yeah. And I, I learned a lot of things on my trip. And when I got to Korea, they couldn't even go into port because of the wreckages and stuff, because Korea was so torn up. The we landed in, I think it was Seoul, and again, I felt the presence of Jesus Christ constantly. And so I was made a communications sergeant of I had no rank, but I was made communications sergeant in the 23rd Infantry Tank Company.
Wow. So what did that mean you did?
Set the radios up on the tanks for the soldiers. That was my job, to take care of the radios in the tanks. And a guy had served his term and he was going to be shipped out, and I replaced him. And so they had me stringing telephone lines from the tank company, which was shooting those tanks in direct fire over the mountain into the enemy. And so I had to go up on the mountain the hard way. They had an outpost there. And I was on the ridge. I had found the break in the phone line, which wasn't a break. It was somebody had lit a match underneath the twisted pair wire. It was coated with plastic, and the plastic melted and shorted it out. And when I was repairing it, I heard little whistles pass my ear. I looked down, and there was bullets hitting the dirt around me. I mean, they were really bullets, and they were trying to kill me. They had set me up. The North Koreans had set up a trap. They were gonna kill me. I never even got a scratch. Two of the men that was carrying wire for me and helping me were badly injured. I think one of them was killed. Yet, Jesus Christ loved me so much. He protected me in Korea. I went through Heartbreak Ridge, Bloody Ridge, the Punch Bowl. I seen, but Christ was shielding me. Why was he shielding me? Because I had family praying for me in earnest. My mother had lost one of her daughters with an ear infection, and she had a lot of faith, enough for two people. even though she lost a daughter, she never stopped loving Jesus Christ with all of her heart. Anyhow, as the story goes, I had served the time that in Korea, and they decided to ship me back to the States. So we got onto a small ship, the harbor of Korea, and went back to Japan. In Japan, they loaded me onto a bigger ship. I learned all about how the Japanese farmed and the Koreans farmed. They had what they call henny carts. It was manure, human manure. Stunk like the dickens. But that's what they did, and they did a good job with it. There was one family I'll never forget. The papa's son wore that funny looking hat, stovepipe hat. They had a mud house made of mud and stuff. Or clay maybe, I don't know what it was. And that's how they got their food. They worked in their fields in Korea, and they left that out. I should have put that in a ways back. But the greatest thing was Jesus Christ was so close to me. Because of my folks, I had a visit one night, and it wasn't a dream. I thought it was at first, but it wasn't a dream. I thought it was Jesus Christ, and I seen him. He was wearing the clothing that I was in church and Sunday school. They showed us kids, and maybe that was a dream, I don't know, but I felt that it was his presence of Jesus Christ. Scared the living daylights out of me. I woke up and I ran into my folks' bedroom to tell them about it. And my mother says, "Oh, go back and go to bed." They weren't surprised. I think they must have been as close to Christ as you can be. I had an older brother that married, and he was a commercial artist. And he went to California to, I don't know whether it was a Disney thing or what, but anyhow, and he didn't stay. He came back to Battle Creek, Michigan. And he had several children. And they were very religious people. Very much religious. They never turned their back on Jesus Christ. Never. Anyhow, they were shipping me back to the States. And when we came to the harbor where the Golden Gate Bridge is, we went under it. And there wasn't a dry eye aboard that ship. They were all so happy to be back into good old USA. And me included. But I won't deny that I may have done some things I shouldn't have done.
You wouldn't be human if that wasn't the case.
And I constantly asked Jesus to forgive me. He did. Anytime. It always, I never can talk about it without crying. He touched me. I felt his presence. When I was in Korea, I felt his presence. I'll never forget when I was hooking the outpost for the tanks to shoot indirect fire. And the bullets, many times I seen the dirt kick up around me. And I never got a scratch. The worst thing that happened to me was I was cranking the generator, and the crank came out and hit me on the nose. That gave me a bloody nose. And I went to the first aid, or whatever you call them. They didn't even bother to do anything about it. It'll quit bleeding.
Yeah.
Nose wasn't broke or anything, just made it bleed.
Yeah. So now the whole time you were in Korea, did you do that same type thing, hang in the wire for the tanks?
And repaired the radios
Right.
when they didn't
Right.
work.
So did you find
The
any-
big problem that we had in Korea was the antennas that went to the radios were mounted on porcelain insulators, one inside and the other in the feed through the antenna for the radio. And well, it was quite a deal, I'll tell you. I'll never forget that the rest of my life.
Did you ever find any more where they had booby trapped it like they did that one time? Did that happen a lot, or
I had several occasions where,
really?
oh yes, they were always, they had their weapons, most of them that I seen, they had machine guns, but very few of them. They were from the military in what? Not the Japanese, but it was the other. I can't think of the name of it. But anyhow, he followed me. Jesus Christ saw that nothing happened to me. I believe it was the prayers of the people at the church, the Catholics too.
Sounds like I hear that. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop